So thank you everyone for joining us today for our MS Researcher Update. It's our great pleasure to have Dr. Jay Fornusek on the line. I'm Andrea Salmon and I'll be the facilitator for today's webinar. We start all our webinars and programs by acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional custodians, past and present, on whose lands we meet, and we acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to country, and we respect the cultural authority of the elders in each community. Today's a research update that's based on research findings, and it doesn't include management strategies. We encourage everybody to seek further advice regarding their personal situation, and a good starting point can be MS Connect. That's just our disclaimer about Dr. Jay Fornusek is not a staff member at MS. And I'm going to hand over to Ariana, who will explain the role of MS Research Australia.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi everyone, my name's Arjana. I work at MS Research Australia. Some of you may be familiar with our work, but if we are new to you, we sit the umbrella of MS Australia. We work quite closely with the MS societies, and as our name suggests, our emphasis is on research into MS. So with the help of the MS societies, of course, we independently fundraise and help fund research into MS. Wonderful researchers like Jay in the University of Sydney and many other researchers from all over Australia have been funded to look into parts of your MS care and management that may need further digging to identify better ways to improve outcomes. So apart from funding research that is informed by the needs of people like yourselves who are living with MS, we also help to translate research, which means that when the research is ready to, when there's findings that are really useful and valuable for yourselves, we get that information out there with the help of the MS Societies and MS Australia. And we also take findings to clinical trials where they can be investigated for their efficiency from the laboratory in communities of people with MS. Like my second slide will suggest, one of the key things that we have going right now, one of the key platforms we have going right now is the Australian Multiple Sclerosis Longitudinal Study. So you might have heard of this. If you haven't, it's actually based on the Medical Research Menzies Institute in Tasmania, owned by MS Research Australia. And it's a really, really valuable way to capture the needs and areas that are not being met for people with MS. It's been running since 2001, and it sees a huge number of people with multiple each year. If you haven't been involved, if you'd like to contribute to the information that feeds into research and advocacy to the government about your needs that are not met and areas you'd like to hear more information about, the sign up is fairly easy. The slide will show there's a link to the website. There's more information there and also a consent form. It's a really straightforward process. If you're willing to participate, it's minimal commitment. It's just a survey or two a year. You don't even have to fill out all the survey. Whatever you can do to help will be awesome. If you fill in the consent form and send it through to that email address that's on the link, amsls.info@utas.edu.au, or you can post it. That would be really, really helpful to keep the good work going that comes out of the AMSLS. That was my little spiel for today. Feel free to type in the software if you have any other questions, but otherwise, over to Andrea, who will share us his amazing work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arjana, and I'm sorry I said your name incorrectly. It's my pleasure to introduce now Dr. Jay Fornusek. Dr. Jay Fornusek has degrees in physiology and biomedical engineering. For his PhD, he built, patented and tested a cycle ergometer that allows people with paralysis to exercise their legs. Since that time, his research interests have expanded and now include exploring the potential of sport, voluntary exercise, and electrical stimulation exercise to promote health in people with neurological injury or disease, things like spinal cord injury, MS, and peripheral nerve disease. Specifically, Chey's research focuses on enhancing the design of electrical stimulation equipment to allow people with paralysis to exercise at intensities which improve their health. And there's an image of him, so you know who's talking to you today. Thank you, Chey. That's fabulous. We can see that beautifully.
Awesome. Okay. Great to be presenting here. Thanks, Andrea and Anjana. Hi to everyone else. So this is some work I've been working on for a while, and with my brief there, we've talked about electrical stimulation equipment. I'll just, on the first slide, I'll just tell you about myself and how I got into this field. So I actually have a neuromuscular disease myself, which was diagnosed when I was a child. And thankfully for me, although it's progressive, it seems to be related to my height. When I was a child, we didn't know that. And the good thing is that it's left me with enough capacity, because my ankles are fused so I can still walk, to be able to exercise a significant amount of muscle. This means I can keep my legs strong, and I can also make my heart beat really hard and fast, which is really good for fitness. And I'll talk about that more. When you're exercising, one of the challenges, especially when you've got a lot of paralysis, is getting that heart rate going, getting that heart rate racing, because we know from a lot of the studies that are out there at the moment in able-bodied people that how high you get the heart rate is important for fitness outcomes and health outcomes. So I started with a PhD, my study in people with paralysis, and specifically it was spinal cord injury. At the end of that, I then met some people with multiple sclerosis who were just riding the motor megagometers passively. And I wondered whether or not they would be able to use muscle stimulation. This would be about 2004, 2005. And I was told it won't work in them by a professor. And I thought, no, I don't agree with you. I'll go out and I'll have a try at this. And one of the things we'll talk about is muscle stimulation. It activates the muscles so you can exercise, but it also activates the sensation. So it's actually quite uncomfortable. So started out in people with spinal cord injury, and we can get some benefit for them exercising, but now I've wanted to expand it to other populations. So people with multiple sclerosis, other people with cerebral palsy as well, and see if we can give you guys better exercise, because I'm sure a lot of you have heard about exercise and how it's really good for you. We can do this stuff in the lab, and we do it in the lab, but the other thing is translating this technology to the community, is really important. Even in people with spinal cord injuries, we've had this technology, and you'll see some of the old technology in one of my videos. We've had it for 40 years, and I would still say we haven't done a lot of work in actually allowing people to get it in the community. You can see this on my slide there. I've got some different muscle stimulators here. On the right side, I've got some handheld ones that you can stimulate a few muscles with. We've got the Revitive, I think that Dawn Fraser advertised, and perhaps Mark Waugh does as well on TV. We've got the Abtronic that will give you, apparently according to the advertising, a six-pack of 10 minutes a day, which is just, frankly, it's not right. And we can talk about that, why it isn't. We've got more powerful muscle stimulator across there, and we've even got on the other side a gentleman in a red shirt who looks like he's on some sort of bicycle. And if you look carefully, you can see he's got electrodes on his legs. And this is muscle stimulation exercise, which we're going to talk about in a while. So you guys know a lot about multiple sclerosis, and I've been working in this field for probably 10 years. Now, for me, the main points that I saw to challenges were exercising people with multiple sclerosis were that they've got paresis or some form of paralysis, a bit of paralysis, or totally paralyzed. Sometimes it can impair with coordination, and fatigue and heat sensitivity also are quite significant to people with multiple sclerosis. And as you get more advanced multiple sclerosis, it makes it harder to exercise. Generally, people with multiple sclerosis have lower levels of exercise and activity, but that's because of the disease condition. We know it's good for people with multiple sclerosis. Probably 15 years, the studies have been coming out showing that it is good for people with, and a lot of people, and MS Australia is promoting exercise for people with MS, which is great because it wasn't always that way. And with my condition, people still don't necessarily promote exercise for that condition, but I know it's good for me, and exercise is good for people with multiple sclerosis. So what's the purpose of exercise in people with multiple sclerosis? What do I see? Why am I doing this work? It's basically to make people who are paralyzed, give them the ability to exercise and be healthier, give them the ability to maximize what they've got. Maximize the size of those muscles, perhaps their leg muscles, so that they can perhaps do a little bit more function with it. Maybe not, but also make them healthier as well. More blood flow to the legs, perhaps the legs feel better, maybe less spasticity. These are a whole lot of things that are reported from this exercise technique from people with spinal cord injury. And we're also, I see it as an alternative sort of treatment that's backing up the great work that's been done with the MS drugs on the immune system and things like that. So as that's hopefully slowing down the MS, we're coming in with these technologies and we're keeping people healthy, which hopefully improves their quality of life. So you can look at these exercise guidelines, and these are pretty standard guidelines. These guidelines are what able-bodied people are meant to do. And if your MS wasn't so bad, you probably could reach some of these. It talks about doing it multiple times per week. You need to keep doing it. It talks about pushing hard, 60 to 80% of the maximum you can push. And I'm sure some of you are training out with TheraBands and body weight machines and dumbbells and doing that really well for what you can do. Aerobic exercises also, we need to do that as well. Keep the heart healthy, keep the metabolic system healthy, blood flow. And some of us just love to exercise anyway and get the endorphins that come from that. It asks for a moderate intensity of exercise, which is 40 to 60% of your capacity. This is actually quite tricky for populations with paralysis to get to. The forms of methods that you can use when you don't have paralysis are very broad. It's not a challenge to be able to exercise your heart hard. But with advanced multiple sclerosis, the paralysis starts limiting what you can do and the intensity. You might want to exercise harder, but the muscle, either you fatigue too quick or the muscles, you just not got enough muscle mass. Fatigue and heat sensitivity can also limit the exercise intensity. And the sort of exercises that you become limited to might be arm cranking. These are all voluntary exercises. A motor med, recumbent cycling, and depending on your strength, you'll be able to push different amounts. This is all good stuff. But because you have less muscle, it's harder to challenge that heart of yours, which is hopefully in a pretty good condition. You can combine, if you've got good coordination, the leg and arm exercise together on some machines. You can do aquatic exercise. Some people really love that, and that's great. Obviously, can be hard to get to some of these exercise machines. Body weighted supported treadmills. I haven't seen many people do it. It is a form of exercise, but probably it's more for gait training than exercise. I think if you want to exercise hard, you'll sit yourself on an arm crank or a recumbent bike. So these are sort of some options that we have available. So we've got our arm cranking, we've got our motor med, which some people will sit on and because they can't contribute much, or they'll push a little bit, or perhaps even push a fair bit and get your heart going a bit. Aquatic exercise, this exercise here again is arm cranking. This one here in the bottom middle uses arms and legs to get more muscle mass going. So the question is, when your MS gets worse, it gets harder to activate that muscle. And what sort of heart rates can we achieve with these exercise modes? Because I was talking about moderate exercise before, and as a rough guide, we can estimate based on your age what your maximum heart rate should be, or you can get to. So if you're 50 years old, we know that you should be able to get to, if you exercise at your maximum rate, somewhere, it's a bit of a guesstimate, around 170 beats per minute. Now your resting might be 70 beats per minute. There's been a number of studies that have been done with these sorts of technologies we have in front of these voluntary exercise technologies here in people with advanced MS, so EDSS 6.5. So we've got, you know, people that are using a wheelchair a bit or starting to use a wheelchair through to 8. And they could get their heart rate in forms of exercise like this here, the arm and leg ergometer or the arm crank, up to 94 beats per minute over that time. And their resting probably was about 70 beats or maybe 75 beats. And when they tested these people, the maximum heart rate they could get was maybe 105 beats. So relative to their capacity, they're actually working really hard with this voluntary exercise. But the thing is, your heart rate can go harder than that, much harder than that. You can do a rough calculation of 220 minus your age. So if you're 60 years old, you should be able to get your heart rate up to about 160. Okay, and so it's a limitation of your muscles, not so much your heart in this case. And if we don't push your heart hard, we won't get that. It's harder to get those fitness benefits. So one of the ways that in the 80s they designed to get people with spinal cord injury to exercise was they built these cycle ergometers and they made them recumbent so people can sit in them if you've got poor balance. And you can't see it, but they put electrodes on their legs. They put the electrodes in the quadriceps on the front of their muscle, hamstrings on the back of their legs, and on their bottom on their gluteals. And they put these electrodes on and they hook them up with leads. And so this guy here, who one of my participants with spinal injury from a number of years, is shown cycling on here. And hopefully you can see this video when I click it. And so the muscles are being stimulated at the right timing for him to pedal the device. It's all smoothed out by a big flywheel here to keep it going. So it's sequential computer controlled, 1980s computer, of the muscle stimulation. And they pedal around these speeds here that we've seen there, pretty standard for cycling. How do we keep John exercising? We increase the stimulation to his legs. And this recruits more muscle as his muscles tire, because he can't push himself. The stimulation is timing the muscles to push. So we're exercising his muscles. And for people with sensation, this sort of method, we sort of call it like a bit of an electrical cattle prod. So if you're not pedaling hard enough, the stimulation will go up. For this population, it's fine because they can't feel it. For some other populations, multiple sclerosis and cerebral palsy, they have sensation. So these original ergometers are not designed for people with MS, but we've made modifications to see if we can get them to work on people with MS. So, because we want to exercise their paralyzed legs. So this is an old bicycle from the 80s and the 90s. The commercial ones we have available are very similar to this today, but they look much more modern, and they have motors instead of this big heavy flywheel that keeps the legs turning. And there's just the video again, and he's pushing along there. His muscles, it's not very close up, but if you look close up, you could see that the muscles are being contracted to contract. So what are the benefits of this in people with spinal cord injury? And in theory, if people with multiple sclerosis can tolerate enough stimulation, we could get these benefits as well. So increased muscle mass. The muscles of people with spinal injury grow bigger. they get more capillaries in their muscles, and they get a bit more blood flow. Some people report decreased spasticity. It may well help with your bone density in your legs, although bone density is very difficult to get at with this sort of exercise, but definitely improves muscle and blood flow, and for some people really enjoy the effects of having less spasticity. Does it improve their fitness? Unfortunately, it doesn't get your heart rate up too much either, and we'll see that in a later slide. So a lot of these people with spinal injury can use arm exercise to get a harder workout. It might help with weight maintenance. Your muscles are working, you're building muscle. These muscles, are going to require energy, so you're going to be using more energy in your exercise and also during the week when you're just sitting there, because you've got muscles to maintain. Could improve with glucose metabolism as well. Less chance to get diabetes. Having good, healthy muscles is good for that. And some people really like doing this form of exercise. The movement of the legs, they love to see that, but mainly the exercise of the muscles. So back in about 2006 or 7 is when I started working with people with MS, playing around, seeing if they could actually tolerate the stimulation, working out how we were going to do it. And in 2014, I got a grant from MS Research Australia, which was very well timed by me and by them, because it allowed me to get a permanent job at the university here, which means that now I can spend a reasonable amount of my time doing research on muscle stim and multiple sclerosis and exercise and things like that. So in this study, we got these people with fairly advanced multiple sclerosis, and we got them to perform, we watched them for 12 weeks, and we told them you can go off and do any form of exercise you want, and then come back later and we'll give you some FES cycling for 12 weeks, and we'll see what the different changes are. So they were, again, wheelchair users, fairly broad range. Maybe some of the people were still walking a bit. And we did 3 sessions per week. This sort of technology, it's like normal exercise. You've got to keep doing it to keep the benefits. And we're doing 45-minute sessions. And that's one of the things that I will say now is with this muscle stim, it might not be as intense as I'd like it to be, but people can definitely build up to it and do quite long sessions, which is good. And we'll see what the cycling looks like in one of our participants here. And you can see it's nice and slow. It's different to what that other guy was doing on the bike. And this was part of my PhD, is that I built a device that did nice, slow contractions. And one of the things it does is it makes the muscle fatigue in your legs. These muscles are going automatically, remember, with the stim, stronger. It knocks down the fatigue and the contractions are stronger. And so our theory was we can build bigger muscles, and that's what we wanted to do with these. So we're using these slow speeds of cycling to develop more muscle. If you want to think about it, think about when you go to the gym. You don't go to the gym, pick up the weight, and do your 12 repetitions as quick as you can. You do them fairly slowly. You make sure you get a good muscle force. You get a fair bit of time in that muscle contraction. And that's what we're doing here. The same principle applies. So the things we were going to measure were muscle mass. We're really interested in that. We got some, and the money, a lot of the money we used to do MRIs on the legs, so we get really accurate results. And you'll see though some of those MRIs a bit later. We looked at fitness, cardiovascular fitness. We did surveys with quality of life. We tried to look at immune response and also function as well. What did these people feel about the strength of their legs before and after? So we brought them in, we measured them, we waited 12 weeks, and then we gave them 12 weeks of cycling. And most people, I think 90% of sessions were completed. So people really liked it, and they came in and they trained really hard on the FES exercise. And there's just the video again that you can see her quadricep going there, will go there, and then her hamstring will pull back, and she's also got electrodes on her gluteals as well, which might be good for bulking up muscle on your bottom if you're getting pressure sores and to get more blood flow there. So 11 participants completed the study, and after it we found that we got 21% increase in the actual muscle volume, which was really good to see. The participants got used to the intensity of the stim, and they really tolerated it well. And we got the first few training sessions were like, oh, my legs were a bit sore afterwards. And I said, well, that's good. You're using your legs, and the stimulation's uncomfortable. But over the first 5-6 sessions, they tolerated it, and then they asked for more and more stimulation as they got used to it. But also, I think as they begun to experience the benefits and the effects. And we've got an example here of someone who's got some gains in muscle. So these are the legs before and these are the legs after. And this is the participant that gained 14% over these time points. So from this time point to this time point, there's only a small increase in muscle. Overall, the whole 11 people, we got no change, very close to 0% change. But from this point here to this point here, we got a 21% increase in muscle. And the other thing that's really interesting is that, and we probably need to go back and look at this more, is that the muscle looks healthier as well. I think we're getting less fatty infiltration into this muscle. And one of the things they talk about these days about muscle health is that if you've got lots of fat in your muscles, the wrong type, can be unhealthy and cause inflammation in different conditions like that as well. They reported that they felt that their legs were stronger. But when I tested on specific machines, it was difficult to show on those specialized machines, which they probably weren't familiar with. Other benefits they reported were less spasticity, better endurance in the legs, and their legs felt warmer and better blood flow. It was unclear whether quality of life improved, but they really seemed to enjoy the exercise, which was really good to see. And I think the thing with quality of life is once everyone got to this point, I surveyed them at this first baseline, and they all got here, and I think they were all so excited to be doing the treatment that they reported that their quality of life was better. So that's my feeling for why they improved from this point to this point. They've been talking to everyone else that was doing the training. And so when we went to this point here, really, I sort of felt that although their legs are bigger and that exercise and they enjoyed it, that was still, their quality of life didn't improve as much as I'd hoped. So negative stimulation is uncomfortable, but when you're getting gains like this, people really seem prepared to have a go at this exercise. So it was really good to see. Now, the other thing is I talked about aerobic exercise. So how hard is this for you? How much does it get you to huff and puff? Because this is an expensive technology and in its current form. And you may not be able to get one at home because they are expensive, or you may not be able to set yourself up. So you might even have to go somewhere to do it. So the question is it worth doing for aerobic exercise too? Great for those muscle mass in the legs and the feeling of the legs, but is it going to give us a workout? And so we should really compare it to those other options that we've got available, because otherwise it's just expensive technology that we could get the effects of aerobically otherwise. So what we did is we took 3 different modes of exercise in the same population, and we made them exercise for 10 minutes, and we told them to push a 14 out of 20, which is moderately hard. And the 3 different modes they did, well, what we call cycling. So they're on the Motomed, if you know the Motomed, and they're pushing. And then they did that, and you can see here what the peak levels they got up to. And so they started at a heart rate just above 60, so their rest was maybe 65 or 66 or 67. And the amount of oxygen they were using was around rest levels, around 200 in this case for these guys. And when they did the voluntary exercise, we could get them to make their heart rate go up to about 90 something, which is similar to what I reported, I think before, with one of the other studies in this sort of work. So getting your heart rate up to 90. So it's definitely exercise, and they were trying hard to do this, fairly hard to do this. We also did the FES cycling, this one here, And so this time they just had the muscle stim. They don't have to push. The stim does it all for you. I actually think it's less fatiguing in that respect because you just have to tolerate the stimulation. And we got similar effects. The third bit was we said, look, you can push at the same time as the stimulation goes on. And you can see that we've got the heart rate up a little bit more, maybe mid-90s, and the oxygen consumption, how much oxygen you're using, has gone up a little bit more too. So the thing with these exercises is it's good, and it's definitely good to try to push when you're doing it if you've got enough energy with the muscle stim, and they do seem to add together, but this is still fairly light exercise. So here with the stimulation and the pushing, we're still not getting our heart rate over 100, and our resting is like 70. So that's only 30% of our capacity that our heart can do. And remember, we want to stress our heart hard so it gets fitter, and the other systems get fitter too, and we get more health. Because if you are, say, 50, 60, your heart rate should, if you really go all out, be able to get it to 160 or 170. So we want to make this better. And just putting it in perspective here, all those three modes are still considered low intensity exercise. You can do a lot of low intensity exercise and it is good for you. It's better than, something's always better than nothing. But if you can do moderate or high for short periods, it is good as well. And if you can do it for long periods, well, obviously you're very fit and that's great. So just this diagram here just shows us roughly, puts it in perspective. If we've got someone who's 55 years old, right, max heart rate would roughly be, at a guesstimate, around 165. It's not a foolproof calculation there. So that's their maximum capacity. Their resting capacity is here, down at 75, just a guess, 75 beats per minute. And with all these three exercise modes, you can see we're probably in the first 20 to 30% of the exercise that our heart can do. And this is limited by our muscles that we have, which are partly paralyzed or significantly paralyzed. So even if we push with what we've got left over in advanced MS, we're not pushing the heart rate up that much higher. It's probably because we're calling on the same muscles to try and do the job. The FES is hitting those muscles, and then your brain's trying to make those muscles push as well. So surprisingly, it doesn't actually go up much higher. So not surprisingly, it doesn't go much higher. So what's our solution? In people with spinal cord injury, what they do is they do the FES on the legs, and they add arm cranking on top. So that sounds like torture. I'm making you do arm cranking and FES as well. Well, the thing is, right, that you don't have to think about the FES, okay? So it's going to do it for you automatically. And then you just have to think about the arm exercise, which I think most of you are doing anyway, probably. Doing an arm exercise or maybe some boxing or some other forms of exercise to get your heart rate going, hopefully. And this has been developed in spinal cord injury, and we call it hybrid FES exercise. So it's hybrid because we're joining arms and the FES together in the legs. So you don't have to think about the legs. The stim will do that for you. You get those benefits, but when we tell you to, you push with your arms, or if you've really got strong arms, you can push for a while. And so we can see someone here, Kerry, one of our participants that loves to do this. She's got electrodes on her legs, and we'll see a video of her doing it in a minute. She's got a power chair there rolled up, put the electrodes on, plug them in. We do the FES for a while, and then we start some interval training on the arms, and we make a push hard. So with arms activating, hopefully, our cardio, and our legs getting the benefits, and maybe they're going to add something to our cardio as well. Maybe by getting a bigger muscle mass going, we're going to get a better workout. So when I made the slide, we'd done 6 people at the end of 2018. The EDSS average is 7.3, and this is one of the more, if you look at your research, this is one of the more disabled populations studies that we've done. And this is the end that I aim at, because this is where the muscle stim, I think, can help. If your EDS is quite low, then you've got a lot of options available. Here we're bringing these other options to help you. So, and you had to be able to arm crank with at least one arm, because we did have someone who had very paralyzed arm, but she would do really well with this and go really hard with that one arm. So what we're doing here is we want to know, again, we want to compare what sort of effect we can get from just arm cranking. The legs, the FES legs there. So we do our FES cycling, we do our arm cranking, and we combine the two together, and we use this cart up here, which you put a scuba mouthpiece in, and it measures all your breathing, and we measure your heart rate here with this polar monitor, so we know how hard you're working. And when you're exercising, it's really good, at least every so often, to know what heart rate you're working at. We've got this modern technology, especially these, which are fairly cheap, to be able to monitor your heart rate. So what we wanted to know is, how hard are you working? How hard were these participants working, and how much oxygen they were using? And this is just the equipment that we're using here. I have a powerful muscle stimulator that sits down there that gives me enough stim to be able to do this sort of work on the legs. And these are the results that we got. So we looked at it at a range of intensities, because you don't always want to work at 100%, and you can't always work at 100%. But the one that I'm more interested in is the higher ones, 100%. And this is what we show here. Now, for all levels, the FES hybrid, so what is hybrid? It's arms and legs together, made the heart rate higher. So you can see here, we're kicking in at about 130 beats per minute. So compared to arms only, which is just over 100, compared to FES, which remember is about the same as we did before, around that 90 beats per minute, and there's our rest. So if we look at this here, that's our rest, and up there, that's where we got to, and that there is our max heart rate if we're roughly 60 years old. We're actually, with someone with significant EDSS, in this test, just this acute test, we're getting to 60 to 70% heart rate reserve. And if you remember back before, the guidelines said 40 to 60%. And when you get to 60%, you actually get into intense exercise. So it's not moderate anymore, it's intense. So these people could do it with advanced MS. Arm cranking wasn't bad, but again, it's still 25 beats lower than FES. If we looked at how much oxygen you're using with the scuba mouthpiece, again, we were getting higher levels. And the heart rates we're getting here are higher than any of the other studies that people just do legs and arms together. So it's true, people with MS, their heart rates can go a lot higher than we see normally, and this technology is allowing them to do this. And what the interesting thing is, once people started doing this, they love their FES, but once they started doing that, most of them said, I don't want to do just FES anymore, I want to do this together. I want to have a good workout, because I'm sitting here for 40 minutes doing the FES. And so it seems to be more intense. So the next question is, we know MS has a fatigue component, and that might be fatigue, you're doing your exercise and then suddenly you stop, you can't go to those higher levels of exertion. Or it could be the next day or the day after that, it kicks in and you don't recover from the exercise workout that you did. So potentially this is good long term, but we wanted to know whether people with MS can actually tolerate this. Can you do 2 to 3 days a week with this, enjoy it, get fitter, and enjoy it and get fitter? Because there's no point if you're too tired the next 2 days. If it's too hard and it's reducing your quality of life the days that you're not training, well then we need to adapt that. It's all good to train hard, but we need to be sensible about this. So we looked at, is it feasible? And this was a 12-week study that we did, and we only told them to come in 2 days a week this time. And so remember, we're using the muscle stim on the legs, and we're getting them to arm crank. And this form of training called HIIT, which is high intensity interval training, everyone in exercise sports science likes to do it. So we thought it might be a good thing to do too, which means it's when you push for a while and then you rest, and you push for a while and you rest. And with people with MS, I think it sort of makes sense, maybe that this will work well. And so we had them, initially we had them pushing for 30 seconds and on 30 seconds, off 30 seconds. And you'll see in this video where we got the training happening. And you might hear the trainer talking at different times. You can see the legs going there. and she's on a push period at the moment, and she's doing 30 seconds. Okay, halfway there. And one way you can tell whether people exercise hard is whether they're talking or not. If people are talking, they're generally not exercising too much. That was a long 5 seconds. Okay, and you can see she's catching her breath. And so she gets her heart rate up 140, 150. And part of the game in this case is really she really targeting her heart rate. She wants to know the heart rate every time what we're doing. Obviously, the problem with that is the fitter you get, that your heart rate will come down. But it was a really good exercise. But can people tolerate it? Most people can. We found the odd person actually gets, if we push them hard, gets too fatigued with this form of training, maybe 1 in 10 or 2 in 10. The question there is probably for us now to work out when that occurs, at what intensity that occurs, because this is definitely harder than the muscle stim by itself as well. So we can just look at the training and see the rationale here, what our logic is. We've got the FES cycling, which we saw on our legs, and we do that at a slow speed to build muscle. We want that 20% extra muscle that we got in 12 weeks. We want those benefits. And then we've got the arm cranking here, where we push with, and this makes the aerobic response, the theory is, go up. And it seems to be tolerated well. It might well even strengthen the arms. And we can see here, if we look down, this is our heart rate graph, and this is probably somewhere around our maximum heart rate, and that's our resting heart rate. And we start the FES probably about this point here, and we build the FES up, building it up, and then we can see the point where we start the arm cranking here. Heart rate jumps up. So the 30 seconds, up, down. The second arm crank comes in, it goes up, doesn't come down, up, down, but not going down much. And this is what's happening with interval training. You're pushing harder, you're getting your heart rate to come up, and you get a recovery period, but your heart rate doesn't go back down. And because even though the FES isn't that good at aerobic exercise, as a recovery, it's actually doing something, it's making your heart still work. If we look just at arm cranking by itself, it would go up, down, probably all the way down to resting again if we did 30 seconds of this. So if you put this into terms of an able-bodied doing exercise, the arm cranking intervals where you do periods of arm cranking is like sprinting, and this is like jogging. So we've got periods of where we sprint, and then we have periods of when we jog, which is just the FES going. And this is one participant, and she gets a really good heart rate response here. Obviously, it does depend on how much arm strength you have as well. If you have weaker arms, then the FES is going to relatively play more of a part than the arm cranking. But we've found people, even with fairly severe MS, can definitely do this and get and really enjoy doing it. So looking at what we've done, we've looked at the feasibility of FES. We looked at what sort of heart rate response it gives you, and it's really important. It's not the mode of exercise that's important, it's how hard it is and what intensity, whether it be resistance training or it be aerobic training. People try to sell their forms of exercise as a special magic package. That, to me, that doesn't work for me. You've got to break it down to what is it actually doing to the aerobic system, what is it doing for resistance training. So we're getting a good aerobic response, and we'll talk later about how I think you could do this possibly at home. We've seen some benefits to the legs, and people thought they were a little bit stronger. They definitely like doing the FES as well, and some of the people in the study have continued to train for 4 years. A couple of people have continued to keep on and train for 4 years for 2 times a week. We can get that aerobic response going better with the hybrid. So we can get some decent exercise intensities and well above what anyone else is doing with this level of disability. We're looking at the feasibility, and it does actually seem to be quite feasible. We still don't know what periods of training we should do, how we should do, what sort of on and off we're going to do for the arms, and it might be individualized there. And we also have to think about how we're going to adapt it to home exercise. Because I said this is an FES bicycle, it's a bicycle, but really what do I break it down to? I break it down to how hard's the aerobic response and how hard's the muscle resistance. Because basically the goal is to build legs with this sort of technology and exercise, build your leg muscles up, exercise the cardiovascular system, and because you're doing that arm exercise, hopefully that's going to give you a bit of arm strength and exercise your arms as well. When you're exercising your arms, you're using your brain as well. The FES doesn't use your brain. You can just sit there. You have to unfortunately tolerate the stim. And so one of the things I realized a while back was that the bicycle, and this helps with our translation of this technology, the bicycle is actually not that important component of it. People really like to see their legs move around, and if they can push, sometimes they like to push with it. But if we look at isometric contractions, like we'll see in the video here, so what I've done is I've just locked her legs up, and I've got the stimulator timed off another bicycle, and they're contracting at 50 revs, 50 times per second. So this is like if she was cycling at 10 times per second. 50 times per second. And then now I've just slowed the bicycle down, and you'll see that the muscle contractions are less frequent. In theory, they should be stronger, but the 50 revolutions is probably tired, that we did before, is probably tired these muscles. So this is the same form of training that we were doing before, but we don't need a bicycle, an expensive bicycle there. We can have a stimulator. It's got to be fairly powerful, because some of you guys can tolerate a lot of stim. Some of the people can tolerate almost as much as people with spinal cord injury, which is pretty impressive. So this gave me ideas about how can we translate this to the community, which we're starting to do. And the thing with this is that this is so much cheaper and easier to do than have to do a bicycle. Even the setup is easier. And so how can you do this? What exercise devices are available to you? The machines in my lab are not available at this stage, and they're actually quite specific machines. Those that produce the commercial ones took a decision to change to something different quite a few years ago. But that means they can't do that slow speed cycling with the really good muscle contractions. They can't control the stim as well as I can to make it build up comfortably for people with sensation. And they're very expensive. So these sorts of machines probably start around, depending on how the Australian dollar's going, at $20,000. And I think that a lot of that's not necessary. So, I mean, because we can buy they're not quite as powerful, we can get some of these handheld muscle stimulators. They have less channels, but 4 channels can do your quads and your hams on your legs. One of the limits is if you are really tough and you build your stim up a lot, it might not be as powerful as you can tolerate when you're doing that. But if you use the right stimulation parameter, a bit like the one I was using there with that 10 revs a minute, nice, slow, long contractions, you probably get some decent contractions. And it might actually help your aerobic workout if you do something at the same time. And they are commercially available, these sorts of systems. One thing I have a problem with these systems is they need to develop their technology a little bit better, because people sometimes use them so much that the batteries fail on them. Because, so they're not designed as a medical product. That's partly because so the people can get them out there easier without having to go through all the clearance. These sort of systems here cost a lot more, do a lot more channels, but they do cost a lot. There may be some centers that have these, but they're very rare. But you can do a lot with these isometric systems. So the key training points with this sort of exercise and get your heart going and get your muscles tolerate as much as you can. And people seem to, strangely, which is a really interesting concept with people with MS, they really build a tolerance to it. We don't know why it is, but after about 3-4 weeks, they start asking for more and more current. And then I get to a point of saying, look, how uncomfortable is it? You're exercising hard already. We don't have to make it excruciatingly uncomfortable. We just want it, we want to be it so you'll want to do this exercise for a long time to come. Buy big electrodes. The bigger they are, the more comfortable it is. So I have ones that are 3 inches by 5 inches electrodes. And do something at the same time. Now you've seen me promoting arm cranking exercise at the same time, which works quite well. A lot of places have arm crank exercises. You can, machines, sorry. You can buy arm crank machines for cheap, or if you're quite strong, you're probably going to need a more expensive one. But people can do things like boxing as well, or other things like that. Basically moving your arms intensely without hurting your arms, of course, at the same time as you're doing the muscle stim, and you probably get your heart rate to go up. And I think this is the potential we've got to using these devices cheaply in the community. If you've got weak hands, then you might need help with the electrode placement or electrode clips rather than pins. I've noticed that with people with multiple sclerosis, putting the electrodes on and off can be tricky. Start with your hamstrings. If you've only got a 4-channel, the most important ones will be those quadriceps and hamstrings. But if you've got a bit of spare time, you could get someone to put them on other muscles as well, maybe on your glutes or on your calves, depending, to give them a bit of a workout. Again, with all these things, I should say, stimulations, there are some things you should check the contraindications for. For example, the standard contraindications are don't use it if you're pregnant, if you've got a pacemaker, get it checked out, different things like that. If you've got, possibly blood clots, you be sensible about it, speak to the people that deal with these systems as well. This here just shows a video of someone with spinal, not a video, of what you can do when you can tolerate a lot of current. This is a person with complete spinal injury before and after 6 months of training. And again, they're turning the current at really high levels. This person actually builds a lot of muscle, but actually can't use that muscle. But is it good? Yes, it is good metabolically. It's good for their health. The quality of the muscle looks good as well. So that's basically my research and where we're going. And it's good to see that we can, we're starting to get to exercise people with MS and exercise, give them a decent intensity of exercise if they want to choose to do that. FES by itself, a lot of people speak highly of that, but when you do the two together, I think that's what that's one of the ways to do it. Even with my people with spinal cord injury now, who used to just do the FES cycling, I tell them, well, come on, you're just sitting there doing your FES, let's do the arms, let's get a decent workout. You might as well do that. Hello.
Hello, Che, that's been fantastic, so informative. I'm just going to take back control
Sure.
for a few more slides while I give people a chance to pop into the area any questions they have. So this is sort of like, just a bit of fill in to allow people to type. So I'll just remind everyone that's online, MS Connect is there for you for advice, and it could be advice around exercising or activity or getting involved in stuff, things that you might have been stimulated to think about. We have a fabulous peer support program where you can connect with other people, either face-to-face or by phone, where you might want to check out what are people doing in other locations. We know we can't all necessarily get involved at the level that Che's been talking about, because those machines are quite unique to a research setting, but there might be other things that you might be able to get involved with. A couple of tools online about Get Your Act Together is one of them, or we have an Eat Well, Live Well tool. And just a reminder that if you're in employment and you're thinking that your MS in any way might be impacting your job, we want you to get connected to our employment support service. As an organisation, we're also involved in the NDIS, and we can help people connect to My Aged Care as well. So that's really just a bit of a blurb to allow a bit of time to take, for people to ask questions. So I've got one to ask you first, Che, and this might be almost a bit too hard to answer, but following research like you're doing that is showing the benefits of these programs, what would you hope would be an outcome? That we'd be able to have more programs like this available, or is it simply just showing that the benefits are there?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, there's no point in me doing the research if we can't get it to people. And this is one of the things that with spinal cord injury, they've been doing it for years, and really we've struggled to do that. People with MS, from my experience, are very, if you give them an option, they'll try to take that option to exercise. So definitely I want to get that out there, and I think it's achievable. Yes, and the other thing is, yes, you can do it. It's good to show people you can do it, but there's no point in me showing what happens if they can't access it. So the two things are really important. With that particular study, one of the things we haven't really talked about is I would hope that it would spin off. I mean, it's great to exercise hard into some way, like, does it improve people's fatigue? You know, does it make them less fatigued if they work with this and they get a bit fitter? Yeah.
Absolutely. So Verstein has a question similarly. Is there a plan to make the machines commercially available?
So there is. We're working with to make the muscle stimulators. The machines are commercially available, but not the manufacturers haven't really thought about. I don't think haven't thought about people with MS or other sensation who still have preserved sensation, because really spinal cord injury is just a small piece of the pie. People with spinal cord injury, there's a lot of research around it, but as far as this sort of exercise technology goes, focusing on people with sensation and MS and cerebral palsy and stroke is really important. So we do need to do that and make the machines available. But one of the things is that if you suddenly realize that, hey, we don't need an expensive machine, then it is a lot easier to make it commercially available, a simpler system which gives you some of the benefits, or I think a lot of the benefits easily and much cheaper. And once it's cheaper, because there's a lot of people that come out, and I talk to a lot of people. I was actually talking to a guy today about, he says, oh, we've got to make this commercially available, you know, and I'm going to make a cheaper one. And well, when it comes down to it, most of them try that, but they don't really make a cheaper one because their system is very similar to the other ones. So we're thinking about it being a lot simpler here, and maybe making it a lot simpler. And I am working a group from India who are also working with, I used to build muscle stimulators, but unfortunately I don't have enough time to be developing that as well as doing my research. And we built a muscle stimulator out of India, and they're great at making low cost things. So yeah, that's the goal, is we do want to get these available. And the thing is, it's not that they're not available at the moment, it's that either the sales and support is poor, they're expensive, and people don't know how to use them well. If you come to me and you train with me for 8 weeks, you'll know how to use it. And if you go anywhere, you'll be more expert than the person that is trying to put you on the bike. So there's a learning involved as well. And somehow we need to educate people about what the goal is, because most places I go where I see other people exercising with a muscle stim, they're not turning it up enough. And the participant doesn't understand that they're relying on, so hope to make it commercially available. But yeah.
So on your sort of second last slide, you talked about the differences between the isometric simulators and the commercial FES cycling ones.
Yeah.
Are you thinking that the isometric are worth people doing or not worth it?
I think it's probably worth a try. If, I mean, my disappointment with some of those systems is that, for example, I knew someone that was using it regularly, religiously, every day, loving it, enjoying it, but I thought the sales and support didn't, she gave up because the sales and support guy just wasn't backing it up for that particular company. So that needs to be better as well. I think the isometrics are worth a try. They're not, I mean, I know that's a reasonable amount of money there, but it's nothing compared to the 20,000 for one of the other machines. I mean, understand that it might make you feel stronger, and everyone has their own, depending on their level of disability, has possibly something they report on function. So for one lady, it was that she can now turn around in bed because she has a bit of leg strength to be able to do that. For other people, it's that their transfers are better. the good thing with the isometric stimulators is they can mimic strength training really well, whereas most of the bicycles can't, even the commercial ones can't do that.
Okay, and there's a question here about providing recommendations for frequency levels and duration, but I'm imagining that that's a case by case. It needs an assessment and then advice rather than a blanket. Everyone should do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. So as long as everything is going okay, then you would, and you can aim at those guidelines that I gave at the beginning, and you're not getting any other complications due to your MS, then they would be great to hit if you can. But as far as the frequency of training, I would say 2 to 3 times a week is good. 3 is better for aerobics, but muscles seem to build up in 2 times a week. As far as frequency of the stimulation, that's a fairly set parameter. We don't have to go modify that too much. The stimulation intensity is you build that up, and the more you build it up, the deeper the current goes into the muscles and it gets those deeper fibers to come in. So you want to turn that up, but it's got to still be tolerable. And if you're getting any, most people don't, but if you get any little marks on your legs or skin irritations, then you want to be wary of that as well. So yeah, and the thing is, if you're going to spend a little bit of time putting the electrodes on, and it does take 10 to 15 minutes to put the electrodes on, I recommend that you do, if you can tolerate it, and you will possibly be able to build into it, do a longer session. It's no point putting electrodes on, 15 minutes, put your electrodes on, and then you do 10 minutes of exercise. And then you have to pull them off. So so when we do it, we do 45 minutes. And the first session they ever do with FES, I hardly turn it up at all. And I'll ring them up the next day and they'll go, oh, my legs are a bit sore. And I said, well, they haven't done anything. And within a couple of weeks, they're pushing much harder than that and their legs aren't getting sore. So it's like any exercise.
Yeah.
You've got to know, you'll build into it, but you also got to appreciate what's normal soreness from doing exercise and what is bad overdoing it soreness. Joint pain, things like that. So be wary of that, but you normally know when you've got a bit of muscle soreness there. So yeah, you can do people with MS. I mean, the way I think of it is that people with MS, their muscles, within reason, if they've had paralysis for a long time, their muscles will be deconditioned, but the response of their muscles is normal. It's the nerves and the central nervous system which is the issue. The muscles they adapt like everyone else's muscles. It's just that they don't get to do much, so they waste away, they're smaller, and they can't be activated. If we activate them, then they will adapt, and we probably won't overdo it. People with spinal cord injury, we used to get a lot of questions like, they can't feel their legs at all. How do you know what you're doing is dangerous to them? And well, it's like, well, we don't, they can't tell us, but we've never seen any problems over the time that we've done it. And these days people just don't ask us about, those sorts of questions anymore, because it's accepted to not do and not exercise their legs. So for some people it's a choice. Some of them can go and exercise their arms instead. They're big, strong arms, some of them. But yeah, so I guess that's an answer. That's what I would be doing if you've got one of these nice systems. Do it regularly. It's exercise. It's assisted exercise. It's not magic. Unfortunately, you need to keep doing it regularly. And if you enjoy that sort of exercise, it might well work for you really well.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you everyone for being online. Thank you MSRA as well for being online. That's been really informative. I'll again, just as we close off, Che provided his email address, so if there's anything else we want to follow up, I'm going to assume that we can just email you directly, which is fabulous.
Yep.
And I'll just thank everyone again on behalf of MS, and thank you, Che, for being online. And a thank you come in that's thanking you specifically for researching and presenting information on exercise for people with advanced MS, because the person popping it in says we're usually in the too hard basket.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
fabulous. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being online today. We'll look forward to seeing you at another webinar.